I don't know why. I can't really explain it, but the forest was familiar in a way I can't put my finger on. Even in this decayed state, I knew these trees, rising like naked spires into a grayed-out sky. I knew these trees. I knew this place. Some idea was buzzing in the back of my head, and when I finally wrap myself around it, the familiarity of the forest makes both less and more sense all at the same time. In psychology, genetic memory is a theorized phenomenon in which certain kinds of memories could be inherited, being present at birth in the absence of any associated sensory experience. Such memories could be incorporated into the genome over long spans of time. So maybe that's how I know this place then. I knew this forest in my very DNA, as if it was a part of me. Maybe I was always destined to be here then. I am alive. The soldiers flanking me are alive. But everything else around us is dead. The term nuclear winter had meant little to me until I had first stepped out of the shelter after the event. Then it had all made sense. Like some facemeal of the sleeping world of winter, this nuclear winter was silent too. But instead of sleeping, everything was just dead. The earth had been stripped down to nothing but tepid skies, charred dirt, and black ash snow. Much has changed since the event. What the collective scientific world has been calling the atomic arrhythmia. A rather fitting name for what could be described as a flutter in the heartbeat of nuclear physics. For just a few nanoseconds, the laws of physics as we knew them had failed. Gravity fluctuated sporadically across the world, estimated peak values reaching 20 Gs in some places, enough to crack the foundations and structural components of buildings, ending in a seemingly random building collapse. Onlookers within a few hundred feet might not have felt any difference at all. Light slowed, causing computer processors and memory to fail, bringing computer systems to a halt. Nuclear fission ceased and then restarted, expelling 100 times the typical energy. And that was the part that killed the Earth. All 457 nuclear reactors on the planet went supercritical, some slowly leaking their radiation out to poison the world around it, and some spiked so high their cores detonated and leveled entire cities, breaking the old rules of physics. I had been a biologist before, but now what life was even left for me to study? In isolated pockets scattered around the globe, things still lived, but here in my home, it was just death. The people who had been lucky enough to be sheltered, the few animals that had been brought with them, and maybe the roaches. That was what was left of my home. Still, I was under government contract, which was why I had been lucky enough to be sheltered, and when I had been called to action, I answered. "An anomaly in the forest," they had told me. "We think it might be alive." So I had gone with them, driven over miles of dead earth to the edge of this forest that pulled at my very genes, and they suited me up. If the cold way the soldiers had treated me on the way over hadn't been sign enough, the hazard suit they put me into would have been all I needed to know how meaningless I was to them. These soldiers were in uniform. Their gas masks fitted perfectly and their rebreathers flat and flush to their bodies, allowing them to move with ease, guns cradled in their grasp. Me, on the other hand, they crammed into a too big orange vac suit, the seal on my mask questionable, and my only source of oxygen, 2 old scuba tanks fastened to my back. Either we were low on supplies, or I was expendable, Among my black-on-black elite escorts, I stuck out like a sore thumb. The single soldier that had spoken to me, Mikhail, stopped and turned to me before we entered the forest.
Eugenie,
he says, voice distorted through the mask.
Do not wander. The anomaly is ahead.
It was cryptic, but his warning slid off me like water. I was positively thrumming with the need to step foot in the woods, my body buzzing like an electric storm to find the beating heart of this place where I belonged, where I had always known I belonged. What is it exactly? I had asked Mikhail earlier, but he had only shrugged.
Something strange enough to catch the government's attention amid a global crisis, but that's all I know.
He had replied. I was just supposed to observe, my directives had said. Observe, make notes of the anomaly, and report my findings. There had been scientists far better suited for this, and apparently none of them could make sense of it. Nuclear physicists, electrochemists, a list of PhDs longer than my arm. Either way, I was meant to be here. Yet, no matter how much my nerves came alight as I crossed the threshold of that gray, towering place, I was still afraid. The Geiger counter on my hip had been clicking steadily as we approached the wood. But once I crossed into it, the clicking had gone crazy, as if the radiation had sunk so much deeper into this place. The black flakes of pseudo-snow continued to fall, and with the soldiers I pushed on. I walked for hours, or maybe days. I'm not even sure. Past the carcasses of cars and machinery, sticks breaking under my boots. I tried not to look at the human shapes behind that dusty glass of so many windshields, and pressed on towards something that called me, and called me, and called me. But the weight of its need was becoming too much to bear, and I lagged behind, sucking in desperate breaths of canned air in my suit. The anomaly pulled at me, but I faltered, staggering. Mikhail, I gasped. But he was far in front of me, and my vision was blurring. Mikhail didn't answer. Bile climbed up my throat and the Geiger counter clicked on. Between one blink and the next, I left the forest. The soft, ashy ground beneath my heels became hard, like concrete, and when I forced my eyes open, I stood in what seemed at first glance to be a warehouse, except one hewn from stone. Here, the thrumming of the anomaly at the center of the forest was so thick that I couldn't even raise my bowed head to look at this place, both ancient and brand new. The epicenter of something just born, or the grave of a dying world. The thrumming, it echoed around me.
Eugenie,
Mikhail yelled, and I was pulled from the empty place back into the forest. Mikhail stomped towards me, aggression apparent in his body language as he jerked me to my feet.
You'll fucking die if you fall behind. Do you hear me?
The side of his rifle pressed into my leg, and I swallowed hard, nodding. He released me, marching away without another word, and I followed in his footsteps. Surely I've been hallucinating, I thought. The government had sworn that this suit and the various injections had been given would protect me from the radiation, but maybe it was getting to me. Maybe that was the thumbing that seemed to both draw me in and suck the life out of me. Maybe it was just radiation sinking into my pores. Still, I could not die until I reached the heart. I couldn't say whether it was night or day, with only the anemic light from the sky showing us the way. But we walked and walked. Every few steps, every few breaths, I thought maybe I was back in that empty place. But it was just the picture behind my eyelids. The empty place, a human skull, Fox decaying in the field, my own face, an RMBK graphite block. These images played for me with each blink until my head felt ready to explode with it. The Geiger counter clicked on. I was sure I was going to fall behind again when suddenly Mikhail came to an abrupt stop, raising his fist in the air, which caused the other soldiers to follow suit. I straightened, but the falling ash in the thin light of the sun made it impossible for me to see past Mikhail.
"We have arrived,"
he announced. With his words, everything came in a sharp clarity. The thrumming reached a fever pitch, and although some primal part of me was repelled, all the rest of me felt like running forward. There are few defining moments in your life besides birth and death. My first sight of the anomaly was a little bit of both. The Geiger counter seemed to almost scream. In the center of the clearing, 5 men stood, dressed in stark white hazard suits, while the center man was dressed in green. All but the man in green were also soldiers, but something about them seemed different, almost unforgiving. They guarded the beating heart, or what they had called it, the anomaly. Maybe this was where the bomb fell, or maybe the potential for this thing had always slept in this forest. Either way, it was completely alien, while at the same time being eerily familiar. Graphite blocks, like the graphite fuel rod housings of my hallucinations, twisted and turned and writhed around each other in an imitation of life. Dozens of them, floating off the ground, drawn around each other like a moon around a planet. It looked almost like an atom. At that moment, I didn't care what my genetic memory had to say. My blood ran cold. This was something so unnatural, so out of place while trying to imitate the building blocks of our world, that I was too terrified to think. My feet staggered backwards, and I was ready to flee, all while the anomaly tried to pull me back in. So terrified I was that I almost didn't hear the clack-clack of the soldiers' rifles around me. The soldiers in black I had arrived with held a tight half-circle, walling me in. The white-clad soldiers kept me in from the sides. "Eugenie," the man in green said, and for the first time I really looked at him. Everything about him said scientist, not soldier, from the advanced hazmat suit he wore to the lack of a gun in his arms. "You are to approach the anomaly." "What?" I stuttered, turning to him in shock. "I don't even know you. I'm a biologist, for God's sake. No one ever said I was going to be some sacrificial lamb." "You are to approach the anomaly," he repeated, and it was then I felt the rifle pressing into the small of my back. "The country depends on you, Eugenie."
"Go,"
Mikhail, pressing the gun more firmly into my spine, hissed.
"It won't be over until you go."
The anomaly twisted. Chaos incarnate, and for a second I considered just letting them shoot me. What was the point, even? But my human self-preservation won out in the end, and I pushed forward, past the soldiers in white, closer to the horror that awaited me. My bones sang with it. Even now, something in me wanted this. It had been like a magnet drawing me in when I first entered the forest, but now it pushed me back like some kind of force field. I was welcome to watch this birth of worlds from a distance, but the anomaly did not want me to come any closer. Every shuffling step was a Herculean effort, a bullet in the back, or the monstrosity in front of me. In the back of my mind, I could hear myself screaming, but the grating of metal on metal was all I could hear. Endless and eternal, I shifted and shifted and shifted. I wasn't going to make it. I fell to my knees and I could taste the coppery tang of blood on my tongue as I did. The anomaly was still over a dozen feet in front of me, but I simply couldn't move anymore. I can't, I gasped. Bullets exploded around me, but before I could curl around myself, I was back in the empty place. This time I wasn't alone. The anomaly had come with me. I don't know why it had taken the shape of dozens and dozens of graphite housings, but maybe it was like my own genetic memory, just a shape from the past, back from the depths of the nuclear plant from which it was born. When the bomb had exploded, the very fabric of reality had broken, and this abomination in the shape of an atom, writhing and turning, was born. I wanted to crawl away from it, and from the grinding sound of it moving over itself, echoing off the empty walls. But I couldn't. I could only raise myself to my knees, and with a dawning horror, I realized the anomaly wasn't the only thing in here with me. In the anomaly's nucleus, the man in green yelled, his body battered again and again by the graphite blocks. It was swallowing him.
Eugenie,
he panted. How did he even know my name? I thought distantly. He was wasting his breath, being consumed by the anomaly bit by bit, like a microphage absorbing a pathogen. Between the shifting blocks, his blood ran down, barely red in this place, mostly black. It trickled between the blocks first before it became a flood. He made no sound in his death, besides the cracking and breaking of his bones. It could have been symbolic, this brand new being destroying the old, but the pieces of the green man being crushed between those blocks were not prophetic or enlightening. It was just death, and gore and red-black blood. Nevertheless, I yearned for it. Like a shockwave, the empty place spat me back into reality, having shown me what it wanted me to see. The first things I felt were the hot tears running down my cheeks, and the first thing I heard was the silence of my Geiger counter. Suddenly, I was back in the forest, pushing myself to my feet. For the first time since I entered this place, there was silence both in my ears and in my bones. Bizarrely, the sun broke the clouds and shone down. In that moment, I was sure I was suffocating, and radiation be damned. I yanked my mask from my face and sucked in the clean, fresh air. The anomaly was gone, and there was nothing there in that clearing with me besides the battered corpses of the soldiers, their blood staining the gray grass. I don't know if I passed some test, or if the anomaly had just left me to die slowly from radiation poisoning. It didn't matter why I was still here. I just tilted my head to the sky and soaked in the sun.